I wanted to ask you about that because I have, well, my book series Kind of Cold. Obviously, part of it takes place in Japan. Depending on the book, the main character is Japanese American. Her parents from Japan. And in writing that book, because as you know, I have an interest in Japanese culture on many different levels.
You got to come
Um,
visit us, sir.
I'm trying to get there, man. Hopefully this year will be it, but I can get back there. But yeah, we had this is the Lost Generation, which is I think in over there is roughly around our generation. It's kind of Gen X. I think it was kids born or coming of age in the 90s, and there was like this period where there were just no jobs. So you had the people that graduated, they had their jobs set for life, and then the people wasn't any space for this whole generation, and then the young people that came in after them, they have, they go to the career fairs and get their job and everything else. So they're reportedly, this is what I've seen, is there's supposed to be this whole disenfranchised, I guess over here we call them the incel type or whatever, who have an issue with being in that lost generation, and there's really nowhere for them to go. I don't know how much we're going to get into some serious territory here. I don't know how much that had to tie in with the whole situation with Abe and assassination. Some people ascribe it to that church and all this other stuff. I
That's
don't
a
know.
good story.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you touch on that because you're obviously there and you obviously experienced it because it's the prime it's the guy in charge. It'd be like if Trump or Biden got assassinated over here in the middle of the street in broad daylight. So with a gun too in Japan, which is a makeshift gun, which is they're illegal in that country, which was really weird. So is it that bad for that lost generation? Do you know anybody who's in that lost generation?
It's bad. It's really bad. And the thing is too, Japan had, I'm paraphrasing here. I don't want to be, Japan had the illusion of the perfect system.
Right.
It's like, this is the perfect system. Nothing works. Nothing goes wrong. It's the perfect system. And then a generation, probably our parents' generation, really greedy. And they're like, well, the perfect system, what if we just don't retire and stay on top? And then that slowed down the perfect system. And then they're like, what if we just save all our money and don't spend it? That was a factor. And then, if you guys remember, probably early 2000s, 90s, around that, there was a big thing about overpopulation.
Right.
No one took it seriously except the Japanese. So now there's no young people. People are not retiring. And the older people are stuck in their ways. That's a fancy way of saying a bit racist. Stuck in their ways.
You're talking about gaijin.
They're not spending money. And then that older generation's going to the younger generation. Just do what we did. And it's like, well, no, because people stepped down for you. Right. People spent money. People, so the future is not bright for Japan unless someone smarter than me comes along. And I don't know what that is. You know what I mean? Like, if there's someone smarter than me, I'll root for you. But you just sit there and look at all the puzzle pieces, and you're like, this is above my pay grade. This is a bad thing about to happen.
Well, I'm curious because we have kind of the opposite problem here in the States, right? So from my observation, and this will be on another podcast pretty soon. It's interesting here because there's a lot of money spent, but it's also a lot of money spent by the consumer class. This is part of the reason why the rich get richer, poor get poorer, because we had the stimulus checks. We got all that stimulus money. All these people got their stimmies. We came up with a term for it. When you come up with a term for something, you know how prevalent it is. People were getting their stimmies, and then what they would do is instead of saving it and building up some sort of wealth for themselves and some sort of cushion, they spent it, which meant all the money went back to the people. The rich people got all the money at the end. So it's like it's a weird kind of combination there. But in here, the statistics are usually that wealth only lasts 3 generations. By the time Todd gets a business, and by the time it gets his stupid ass grandson, the grandson's already spending on hookers and blow and whatever. So that tends to be what happens in this country. Is it similar? Could it be a similar thing in Japan where you have that older generation that's hoarding all that money, but what happens to that money when they start dying off? Or are the younger generations going to inherit it? Or does it go to the government? Or does it go, is it just stay within families? How does that work?
For the record, this is out of my pay class.
Yeah.
This is just from my experience. So like I don't want people to be taking legal advice or be like, this guy knows everything.
This is all
But
all anecdotal.
the government takes a big chunk of it.
Ah,
The
okay.
government will take a big chunk of it. I know that for a fact. You have to find loopholes, you have to find ways around. And also your family lineage, family line really matters. So my friends recently had one of the older relatives pass away.
Right.
And they were like, "Oh, okay, well, I guess I did everything, so I'm going to get the money. No one else exists." And he's like, "No, he actually had a kid in 1942 and she's 98 years old. You have to go talk to her." And it's like, "Oh, she's senile. She doesn't know what's going on. So we'll just wait till she passes away. She has no other kids." So then the government makes interest off that. So
Mm.
it's just like anything else. You have to find loopholes, and it's not a smooth transition because we worry about that stuff too, just because we're here and it's like, you know, but yeah, like I feel it's a little out of my pay grade, but from what I've seen from people, most of the time the government takes it. Like it's like, "Oh, your grandfather worked really hard." And like and especially if you don't have a will. "Your
Right.
grandfather worked really hard. We're going to take that away. We're going to take that away." And what's very important, and I don't want to say I hang out with wealthy people, but I hang out with wealthier people than me.
Right.
IPs matter. Like if you created something that's amazing and they pass down the IP, that's guaranteed as long as that IP doesn't die off,
Right.
guaranteed cash. So I've worked in anime and manga, and some of the families that own the bigger ones,
Mm.
they're set for life and life and life and life and life because they're passing down an IP and not passing down cash that can be taken away.
God, that almost that's kind of like it's almost like a feudal system, like lords and ladies, kings and queens. Like it's kind of the similar kind of thing where the family just keeps the title,
Yeah.
and the title pays. In this case, it's the intellectual property. It's basically the same thing as being a being not a serf, because that's what the rest of us are, but being one of the privileged, elite, the princes and bishops and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's very weird how different civilizations are like just doing the same thing we did in the past.
Over and over. Yeah.